If you've ever taken a questionnaire, you've probably noticed that these questionnaires seem to ask the same question in several different ways. This can even be a source of frustration for many survey takers who think, I've already answered this, why are you wasting my time? Why indeed? Of course, there is a reason for doing this. Humans are remarkably sensitive to subtle changes in wording. Don't believe me? Consider if your boss or teacher were to one day say, your work is not good enough. Wouldn't you have preferred them to say something like, you have some things you could improve upon? Still sound a bit aggressive? What about, there are some things that you could do to improve your work beyond where it already is? Subtle wording changes can impact our reactions. Subtle wording changes might even impact our memories. For example, Loftus and Palmer's famous 1974 study showed participants a videotape of a car crash. After shutting it off, participants were asked a question. In some cases, researchers asked how fast were the cars going when they collided with each other. But they varied the verb in the sentence in other cases. For instance, sometimes they asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other instead of collided. Participants who were exposed to the word smashed instead of collided, or another verb, were far more likely to report that they saw shattered glass from the car windows on the street after the accident. There wasn't any glass on the street in the original video. Think about that. Changing one word in the question completely changed the way that people remembered the incident. For this reason, items in a questionnaire need to ask several questions because each one measures some of the underlying construct, the variable intended to be measured, and some of the other stuff that is irrelevant or tangential. If we use multiple items, whatever they have in common is likely to be related to the underlying construct, we call it the latent variable, that we're intending to measure. Let's say we want to measure a variable like learning self-motivation. A 3-item questionnaire might show items like, I like to read to learn. I seek out new information so that I can learn new information. When I want to know more about a topic, I try to teach myself. Let's imagine that participants are responding on a 5-point agreement scale from 1 to 5. Internal consistency allows us to quantify how much these items are interrelated. That is, if a participant scores particularly high on one item, we would expect them to score about the same on the other items as well. For this reason, the 3-item scale I presented before is flawed. Imagine a participant who answers 1 on her first item, but 5 on the other 2 items. They're probably trying to tell us that they are highly self-motivated to learn, but they don't do it through reading. And that would hurt our internal consistency estimates, because one of these things isn't like the other ones. The first item is asking something a little different than the other two. Coefficient alpha is the most common statistic used for estimating internal consistency. However, please understand that there are many problems with this statistic. Coefficient omega is probably a superior alternative, though it is much more cumbersome to estimate. Reporting both statistics and their confidence intervals is probably the best approach to truly contextualizing internal consistency statistics. For now, I'll focus on alpha because convention. Coefficient alpha produces a single value, which, by convention, we prefer to be over 0.7. Anything under 0.7 tends to be considered less than adequate internal consistency. If a scale's internal consistency is under 0.7, we should probably trust that scale less. I hope to do a future video on alpha, omega, and CFA as varying means for estimating internal consistency, unidimensionality, and the underlying factor structure of a particular scale. For now, know that you're expected to report something about the internal consistency of the scales you're using. Reporting alpha is better than reporting nothing, but it is still deeply flawed.